So compassion for humanity is something that sooner or later one will be called to refine within one's being, because without a grounded compassion for the human race, the concept of the collapse is totally intolerable, and the suffering that it represents can make you depressed or depleted, or go into like an empty place where there's kind of like no sustenance there. So you don't want to go into those spaces, and you don't want to be caught up in the suffering of the collapse. Now, compassion is something that refines over one's life journey. I've found for me it's refined in the beginning of my work. I thought compassion was about being charitable, it's about helping as many people as possible, it's about trying to save the human race. And by doing that, I caused myself a lot of suffering. I experienced a lot of karma. As a result, I was able to burn that off and come into a deeper understanding. And in recent times, I like to see compassion in a very different way. Now, my understanding, like helping humanity or helping others, is greatly overrated. Now, the reason why that is because by and large, only 5% of the time is it probably appropriate to help someone. 95% of the time it's more appropriate for someone to find their own way. That might seem harsh, but in the longer term, that's much better. So, by and large, people don't need so much help. It may appear like that, but if you can't discern through the deeper dynamics, it's possible to get endlessly caught up in helping people, where it may be better served to step back and allow those people to find their own way. Now, this is a very important part of the development, because as the collapse gets nearer, there's going to be catastrophes manifesting in the world, and also there may be catastrophes happening in the lives of those around you. Some of those around you may be on a different path, have chosen not to ascend, and may have chosen to depart via death prior to the collapse. Now, once that starts happening, we're talking about big karmic seeds popping up and major disruption. It's not possible to stay grounded in a source in a state of compassion if there's too much disturbance around you. So, to ensure that you see less disturbance, it's necessary to refine the compassion. It's less about closing the door and not having anything to do with anyone, but more kind of refining the compassion so that those that you do interact with are kind of like on the same path and not subject to those catastrophes. And those who aren't on the path are liable to start experiencing karmic catastrophes. You won't see that as much, if at all, if you've refined compassion and learned when to help and when to step back. If this isn't refined on the Voyager path, there's the danger of being caught up in the emotional eddies, the kind of like karmic wake of the suffering of humanity. Suffering in humanity is very considerable, and the collapse, of course, will cause an intolerable amount of suffering, and without the refinement and compassion, we'll perceive it as unfair, we'll perceive many people as being victims to suffering, we'll perceive ourselves as having to help or save many people, and then there's the great danger of exhausting oneself toward the end of the path and not having enough awareness for oneself. Now, at the end of the path, you want your sanctuary, you want to do some inner work and be in the silence. You don't want to be too caught up in trying to help lots of people experiencing catastrophe. You're not going to be equipped to be able to handle that, and that's not the purpose of an ascending being. Ascending beings do help the planet and do help others, but it's something that happens on the other side. because on the other side there's different conditions there, and you're able to have a greater influence on the well-being of the universe. But as long as you're in a body, invariably there's going to be a limit to how much you can help people, and of course you'll become exhausted before you've helped everyone that needs to be helped. Thus it makes sense to refine the compassion, look at where it's appropriate to help and where it's appropriate to allow people to experience their own processes and figure some things out for themselves. If they're allowed to do that, they'll become much stronger in their process and they'll make a quicker progress as well. Now, connected with compassion is also judgment. If you refine judgment, it's also possible to become more compassionate for others and the human race as a whole, and it's also possible to have a deeper discernment as to where you put your energies. So judgment is basically a concept about something that's not necessarily true. For example, that if one thinks a collapse is bad or a punishment for a higher being, for example, that could be perceived as judgment. Judgment involves you with kind of like any story. So if you find yourself judging any person, any being, any situation, then you have to ask yourself what your connection to the story is. What is it that you perceive that's unfavorable or bad? Because if something's good, you by and large you won't make a judgment. Like, judgment is generally a negative trait that helps us to keep bound to karma. So releasing judgment is also about a deeper grounding of self-love and understanding the collapse. When you have enough compassion for humanity, when you've reflected on the matter of the collapse enough, you'll realize how serious that is. Judgment will start to fall away from you, because you'll know that many people out there are going to have a very difficult time. It's going to be far more extreme for many than they're prepared for, and you know that it's going to be painful, it's going to cause a lot of suffering. You also know it's a necessary process, and that on the other side they'll continue their learning. Nevertheless, you don't want to be caught up in judgment about that thinking is bad, or people are experiencing their punishments or anything like that. If you see it as a natural kind of cleansing process, a planetary purification process, you'll see the bigger picture, and then judgment becomes unnecessary. When you're less prone to judgment, you'll also be less prone to seeing disturbing situations. So prior to the collapse, any disturbing situation is showing you how to resolve your karma. The reason why that is, if you're properly grounded with the source and the collapse comes and there's much death, even if you perceive that in front of you, people dying in front of you at the time of collapse, you will not be disturbed, because you understand exactly what's going on, why it's going on. You have the love, you have the compassion, and you have the wisdom. So if you use the mirror of disturbances now in your life, whatever disturbance you may perceive, like use that as a mirror to like burn something off. So something irritates you, it doesn't seem quite right, something offends you, whatever it is, that's important to like burn that off and enter into a place of unconditional love and forgiveness for all beings. That unconditional love and forgiveness isn't then going to go out there and try and save lots of people from the collapse or interfere in people's karma. Instead, it's going to give you the emotional and spiritual capacity to be able to withstand the collapse in your own being and pull off your own ascension. Without compassion, without judgment, at the time of collapse, one would be very disturbed, and as a danger of being pulled into some very intense karmic catastrophe. Now, the truth is, everything about karma is like game consciousness, karmic consciousness. It's all constructed by everyone's ego minds that is participating in a karmic story. If you don't have a karmic story because you've refined judgment and compassion, you don't need to get pulled in there, and you're basically immune to the collapse. You can't suffer in a collapse if you don't have karma. And the fastest way that I know of in recent times to burn off your karma is to meditate on the collapse of humanity and to develop a deep understanding and compassion for what is. And meditating on the collapse cannot not change you in a better way. If you're ready for this path, you know the collapse is coming anyway. You may as well use that as a mirror, because that's one of the biggest mirrors that there are. You use that mirror to burn off your karma, and then you become karma free. Then you understand compassion from a higher level. Compassion is having a love for the human race, accepting what is, allowing the human race to experience its choices, because it will learn via the mechanism of the collapse. And compassion is also non-interference in external karma. It's very necessary at this time to discern what's happening with external karma, because as you burn off your own karma, you'll perceive around you happenings, occurrences, or energies that you might perceive as dense karma or karmic disturbance. So, you have to ask yourself again, like, what is that? Why am I perceiving disturbance? If I'm perceiving disturbance, there's something in myself to refine, and when you refine it, the same phenomena may be there, but you won't see it as a disturbance. You won't have any judgment about it at all. It'll just be stuff happening. Or you won't see it at all because you don't need to be represented with that karmic situation. So all of these mirrorings that we're having now, very intense ones sometimes with others, are all very useful stages of the process, and thus we should welcome this, enter into it, surrender into heart space, kind of look at any difficult feelings, try and break down the mental constructions of judgments and ideas and fears and thoughts. None of that's useful when it comes to embodying compassion for the human race. Compassion is something that crystallizes here, not up there. You can't think your way into compassion. You can't really feel your way into compassion either, because feelings are more superficial emotions. Like the deeper compassion for humanity isn't a feeling. So this is something I've come to understand in myself recently, that strong love from the higher sense isn't a feeling, it's a state of being. It doesn't make tons of emotions I fire off in my being and make me like emotionally exuberant. I used to be like that before, but that was just my lower emotions kicking off without sufficient grounding in the source. So this deeper compassion, it's not a feeling, it's just a state of being. It's not something you can cultivate in itself, it's something that will naturally arise. You can cultivate the likelihood of its manifestation by working on things like judgment, forgiveness, self-love and healing, but you can't make the universal compassion manifest in itself. That's something that will become known to you and be very obvious when you've burned off the karma sufficiently to make that possible. When you have the higher state of compassion for humanity that's a non-feeling, then you have the capacity to help humanity. In my opinion, until you have that, your experience, your ability to help humanity will be significantly limited because you'll be driven by feelings. Feelings will drive you into karmic dynamics and patterns. Now, if it's a source feeling, if you feel the love of source as a feeling, it comes from a source place, then one can share that love and not attract karma. If it's a sentimental feeling, if it's like what I call a lower emotional form of love, if you have that kind of feeling running around in your being, your capacity to help humanity will, in my opinion, be very limited, yet at the same time you'll feel a very, very strong emotional desire to help other people. And by and large, this will deplete you long before you have a significant effect. So those of you in this course that are drawn to helping humanity, or you feel you have something big to give to the human race, like myself, I know some of you have similar ideas, I would say to burn off all the personal karma first and let go of the helping humanity. Do your own inner work, take care of yourself, find that source compassion within. Then you'll find you'll have the wisdom to be able to be helpful on a much bigger scale. It's not useful to be helpful if you can do something in the outer that appears good, but then the karma of humanity kind of like overruns everything. It's like trying to push a mountain or stop a tsunami coming. It's not possible to make any deeper impact on the human race until you've come into that state of source compassion. So this is why my disclosures to humanity have been a long time coming, because before I go out there and profess to be able to help the human race on a planetary level, I want to make sure myself that I have the compassion at the source level, so I'm not misguided in what I'm doing, and so also I'm not misguided by sentimental emotions. When you figure that out about how to help humanity properly, then you have, of course, you have more power, you have more wisdom, you have more grounding, you have a greater capacity to understand the collapse and free from the karmic disturbances that would otherwise disturb you. It's the compassion for humanity and the grounding in the source love, a refined version of those two, which will make you karma immune. You sit in that space long enough, it's not possible to experience karma. Now you also have to be aware of the pitfall of trying to sit in source too soon as well, because based on what I've said about my previous experiences of helping humanity and what I wrote in my books, I look back and I perceive myself back then to have been very degraded, experiencing a lot of abuse, a lot of financial suffering, a lot of contraction, and looking back on that, one would think why I ever did that in the beginning. But the truth of it is, I also had to do it at that time to burn off the karma. If I hadn't have had those experiences, I wouldn't have become more powerful in myself. So, in relation to finishing the journey, be sure that when you're ready to go into your sanctuary and be in the silence with Source, make sure you have actually burned off your karma. If you haven't, if there's something left that you haven't seen or you don't know about, and you go into that sanctuary to finish your inner work, some big seed is going to pop up and push you back out and create a set of challenging situations in the outer that will necessitate you having to resolve something. This is why each person would be wise to think very carefully or to meditate very carefully on the matter of going into sanctuary and retreat from the human race, making sure it's coming from a karmically pure place, making sure you don't try and do it too soon, I've tried this before a couple of years ago. I've tried like going into silence too soon, and all that happens is it becomes very asphyxiating. It's like being on the top of Everest trying to climb the iron. There's no like air coming through the mask. It's totally and utterly unsustaining in there. Source can't hold you because there's too much karma still in the way. That's what will happen if you try and go into it too soon. So it necessarily requires like a strong awareness of self-development, making sure we're being honest with ourselves, asking ourselves, what do I still have left to learn in this reality? As voyagers, there is a very strong urge to go into silence and go into sanctuary and not have anything to do with the outer, but it's necessary to ensure that is right for you at that time, and to make sure you are honest with yourself and make sure you're not doing it to hide. You cannot hide from your karma. You can hide from the impacts of the collapse. If you're karma free, you're going to manifest yourself a place of sanctuary and safety, but there's still karma there. You want to be burning it off before you go into that space, otherwise you're going to experience problems. You may be pushed back out of the mystical castle, so to speak, in order to finish off some deeper karma. So this time we're called to be authentic to ourselves and authentic with others, honest with ourselves about our inner processes, looking within, do we have any demons left, or are there things there that we know are there but we don't really want to look at, or are there like deep fears in the corner of our consciousness? All of these things are cues that there's something to burn off. Now, the way you burn off karma, by and large, until you start meditating on the collapse, the way you burn off karma is through earthly experiences, and thus you're going to have interactions with others. Now, those interactions with others are learnings, and if you have learnings to have in interactions with others, those interactions with others will happen whether you want it or not. So if you go into the mystical castle too soon, you've got some learnings that you haven't done yet or haven't attended to. Something will happen to pull you back out of the mystical castle, and then you'll find yourself having to interact in the 3D again. So this is something to consider in your practice. Tune in with yourself and your processes, take some awareness there, take some source wisdom in there, take some love in there, and you can come to your own answers, and your own answers that come from the source will be your guidance. I can give general pointers and general suggestions. At the same time, each person's on a unique karmic path, so what works for one may not work for another. So for me, for example, I'm going into silence and sanctuary from the human race. I perceive and understand and have had affirmed that my work is pretty much finished here, so it's possible for me to do that. I know others of you want to have the same kind of scenario, and to help you make that work, I would encourage you to go inside yourself and see what your own truths are.